And it's a pretty well-known text, Ishui Rumen, or Entering the Gate of Medicine. And it's an interesting book because it has herbs, it has acupuncture, it has moxa, it has theory, it has like everything. It was really like, if you were going to school at that time, it would have everything you needed to study. Anyway, he has this method. This is, I think, the second earliest method that I found. And he calls it umbilical smelting. Smelting is the process of refining metal. So it's implying like refining and cultivation and stuff like that. And he says, this is Pengzu's life elixir to secure yang and secure the stem. He says where he got it from. So who is Pengzu? He's this legendary figure that was said to live for maybe 700 years. So when you mention his name, that's talking about extraordinary longevity and to secure yang. So, you know, maybe this isn't the best thing for yin deficiency, but for those of us who are cold all the time, it's great. And securing the stem, he'll explain that as we go through the text. So he talks about the human umbilicus, and he starts talking about, you know, some like stuff about the fetus, because the umbilicus, of course, there's the umbilical cord which connects to the fetus. And he says when, you know, humans are conceived, the father's jing and the mother's blood interact with each other and congeal into a primal chaos of the placenta and the fetus. He uses the phrase hunduan, which is the, you know, before heaven and earth existed, there was this chaos, this hunduan, and then the yang rose up and the yin sunk down to become earth. And so, you know, he's comparing this to the time before there was even heaven and earth. It's pre-heaven. So this is the time before the Taiji is separated into its yin and yang parts. And then he says, this one primal chaos kind of divides and separates into two caves, and he uses the word shui, which is the most common word for acupuncture, point, but it doesn't actually mean a point. It never meant a point. It actually means a hole or a cave. So, you know, some of this is a little like, I'm not quite sure exactly what he means, but it separates into two. And then within these two caves, it separates into four. This almost sounds like the cell division. So it communicates with the kidneys on the outside of the fetus, I guess the mother's kidneys, and it grows a red and a white vessel inside. And so this red and white vessel probably relate to the umbilical cord. So among these four caves, these four holes, these four openings, then there's an exterior part going to the kidneys and an interior part. Some of this is kind of beyond my understanding, but he says, you know, during pregnancy, when the mother exhales, the child exhales within her abdomen. When the mother inhales, the child inhales. This is the umbilical stem, and by that, I'm pretty sure he means the cord. This is the umbilical stem for the entire body that connects with the mother. It resembles flowers and fruit on a branch communicating with the stem. So the fetus, the fruit on the stem, which is the umbilical cord which connects to the root, the mother. As each month of pregnancy completes a cycle, true qi gathers and becomes more and more sufficient until the fetus is ready to be born. So he goes on, once the child is born, then don't cut the umbilical cord until the placenta and all the other stuff comes out. If the umbilical gate is not yet closed, then wind or cold can invade through that open gate and harm the infant's true qi. So the placenta should come out and wait until all of that's done. I don't know quite that that's what we do today, but there is definitely an idea that one should wait until the umbilical cord stops pulsing. So anyway, if though it is cut too early, it's no problem for true qi if you do this fuming and steaming method with mugwort fire several times. So he quotes from a book, the umbilical gate closes on its own, but be aware of the depth of the opening. He says, young will prosper and years of life will lengthen if you do this umbilical steaming. Probably both on the fetus and the mother. So he goes on. True qi cannot be smooth and free when it's weighed down by the 5 flavors or addicted to the 5 tones or visited by the 5 qi. So now he's talking about adults, not infants, okay? And so, you know, if we're eating rich foods, if we're, you know, externalizing ourselves with, you know, too much outside stimulation, then these can harm our Jing Shen, our Jing essence and our Shen spirit. Or there can be internal damage if we're eating a lot of cold, fresh food. And so these are things that can wear a person down. Therefore, the method of steaming the umbilicus and securing the stem was established to treat cases like this one due to our lifestyle. We've taxed ourselves. This is like water irrigating earth and banking up grasses and trees. Okay, so this is nourishing us like watering plants. The root strengthens itself and becomes luxurious. When humans frequently depend on the method of fuming and steaming, then yin and wei will be harmonious, and the hun and the huo, the ethereal soul and the corporeal soul, will be stable. Cold and summer heat won't be able to invade, and your body will be healthy. He says this can even be miraculous. So he really loves this method. A lot of the doctors that write about this think this is just an amazing method for strengthening a person. So now he goes on and talks about lung pathology and then kidney pathology, because he feels that this method will help, especially the lungs and the kidneys. The lungs are the huagai, the flowery canopy. They hang over the rest of the yin organs, the 5 zang. The lungs are the place where your voice comes from. Skin and body hair depend on the lungs for being moist and supple. Kidney water also is engendered and nourished from it because lungs are metal and kidneys are water. So when the tsoli, which, you know, people always say pores, but tsoli is really covering a broader range of structures, I believe, in, you know, the hair follicles as well as the pores and so forth. Anyway, when the tsoli are not tightly closed, then external evils can invade, and also internal damage can take advantage of the lungs and make the person cough. External contraction should be dispersed, and internal damage should be enriched. I think you know what external contraction is, but just in case, internal damage is, you know, organ pathology. It's from lifestyle, from food, from working too hard, or not resting enough. So, you know, external damage, external contraction and internal damage are kind of opposites. So there also can be binding constraint. And here he's talking about lung constraint, which should be resolved. When a prescription of acrid dry herbs causes injury, or if it doesn't disperse the excess, it causes constraint. So things can't move properly. Qi does not scatter and become stagnant in the lungs. And so this will make sticky phlegm in the lungs and cause rapid panting or cough. So qi constraint today, mostly people talk about liver qi constraints or liver qi stagnation is probably what some of you say. But in the Ming Dynasty, they talked about lung constraint and spleen constraint and constraint on the various organs. It wasn't just liver, there could be constraint. So constraint, you know, everything's stuck and can't really move. It's a form of stagnation. So he's worried about lung constraints. And now he moves on to the kidneys. Perhaps there's damage from the bedroom, in other words, too much sex, or damage from food and drink. And this can result in spitting blood, alternating fever and chills, dull ears, cloudy eyes, fatigued body, hypertonicity, which is like tension of the sinews, contraction of the sinews, chest fullness with food and drink, so poor appetite, weakened Jing, weakened Shen, just poor health overall, and similar conditions. So he suggests, especially for the lung or the lung and kidney stuff, a couple of pills, which we're not going to talk about today. You could probably search online and find what's in these. One is to get rid of phlegm, and one is to protect the true. And so you can use those or similar things to cure the patient. But if even those medicines are not working, then you can depend on this umbilical fuming. And so he's going to give you the recipe now. And so there are like a lot of herbs, maybe there are 20 herbs in it. And I do give you either the English name or the Latin name below in this slideshow. Sorry, I don't have it on this slide, but first off is musk, sheshang, which is something that we're not so likely to use today, but that's the first thing that he mentions. And so it guides all the herbs into the 5 zang and the 6 fu. It circulates through and penetrates into the 100 joints. So that's the main thing about musk, is it has a very penetrating quality, and when it's used in the umbilicus, we're going to see it's to help the other herbs to penetrate. And we also have some substitute options that we'll talk about later. But this is the original recipe. Dingxiang, cloves, enter the lung, supplement blood, and fills in the spleen and stomach. Qingyan, which is some kind of salt. It's called halite, H-A-L-I-T-E. But, we can use regular salt, like table salt, or, like coarse salt. Anyway, so salt, of course, the salty flavor goes through kidneys to fill in the child. He's talking about lungs as the mother and kidneys as the child. So it prevents the mother, the lungs, from being drained. If it feeds the child, then the child doesn't have to take from the mother. And then, like Rushang or frankincense, it supplements the lower body and boosts qi of the epigastric region, the Weiwan, the stomach duct. And I'm pointing out here, I don't think it's that important, because you could just follow the proportions if you did want to make this. But at the time, 1 qian equaled 3.73 grams, not 3 grams, which is how it's rounded off. So many things had a higher dose than we tend to do today, because we rounded down the amount that a qian equals. Yinming sha, which is some kind of poop. So it penetrates into the lung holes. What are the lung holes? That's what it says. It supplements, maybe the pores, the lungs and the pores, it could be that. It supplements qi deficiency, and it scatters excess from internal damage. Okay? Then Lushang, frankincense, Lushang, sauceria, something like that. Both very fragrant and pleasant herbs for the aroma. Huishang, which is fennel seed. It treats conditions with a lot of dampness that's trickling downward. It's a warming and moving herb, so it regulates and circulates, so the dampness doesn't just like sit there and pool below, but the dampness circulates and becomes jinye, body fluids. It both moves up and moves down without resulting in panting or cough. And so if you want to deal with fluids, you've got to first warm and move, the source, so that the dampness is not accumulating. Mo Yao is myrrh, frankincense and myrrh is the other thing. Goo is tiger's bone. We're not going to use that today. Even if you could find it, this is just endangered species. Snake bones. Okay, I don't know where I could find them, but you can see we need to do substitutions. We can't just use this recipe as is. Long goo, dragon bones, and jusha. Well, externally you can use jusha. In California, we're not allowed to use it internally. He doesn't really discuss those. Xianghua, which is a mineral realgar, we're probably not going to use that. He says, cuts off the root of the disease, supports the weak, and assists the strong. I really like his description of what each herb does. It's you know, different than what Bensky says. Not that Bensky's bad, but Bifluza, it follows all the channels in the Wu vessels, and it has the effect of pulling from in front and pushing from behind. So it gets things really moving, circulating through the channels. Ginseng, Fuza, aconite, and Hujiao pepper, black pepper, supplements original qi, moves blood, and transforms phlegm back into Jin-Ye. You know, the phlegm comes from your own body fluids, your own Jin-Ye, and so this helps make the phlegm go back into their healthy state of body fluids. And finally, the last of these slide with herbs on it, Wulinger, another kind of poop. All of these recipes have lots of animal poop in it. It's something that I'm not really excited about. So it protects lung qi, it gets rid of excess, and it supplements deficiency. Okay, so all these herbs are going to be ground up into powder, put in the umbilicus, and then a slice of something is on top. And so the slice that you most often see is huai pi, which is like we have a Chinese herb, huai hua. It's some kind of tree. This is something that I don't know where I would get this from. And it can block in and retain the nature of all the herbal qi, keeping it from scurrying away. So you put this slice on top, and then all the herbal qi won't float up into the air, but it will, you know, press it into the umbilicus. And then, of course, mugwort, moxa floss. You are going to use its fire and heat to plunder disease and remove toxins. It can raise the dead and return them to life, which is a reference to Bian Cui raising the dead crown prince here. So those are the ingredients. And so here, what are we going to do? We're going to powder all of these things, although he says powder the above, but we don't powder the musk, the sheshang, we don't powder the slice of bark of the sapora tree, we don't powder the aye. So it doesn't say that, but you have to know that. Separately, you make a strip of dough with white flour and make a ring around the umbilicus. You're making a little donut to go around the umbilicus. And then when you ground up all those herbs, divide it into 3 parts and take 1/3 of it. So first you put a little of the musk into the umbilicus, and then you put that 1/3 of the powder that you just made into the ring of dough. So it's like packed a little higher. Some people don't have innies. You know, some people's belly button sticks out or it's not very deep. So we're making this ring around it so we can make sure there's plenty of powder in there. I'll give you a substitute when we get to what I did, what I will do. So compact the herbs, press them down so that they're really solid inside the ring, and then poke some holes in the center. I would use a toothpick, whatever, and then cover it with the slice of huai pi, and then do moxa on top. And whenever the slice gets kind of charred or burnt, we can change it for a new slice. Okay, so that's basically the process. What's it going to do? It's going to strengthen the hot qi or heat qi in the body. This heat will penetrate through the whole body. Sometimes the patient will feel it from moving down, or sometimes they'll feel it from the feet moving up. And they'll become tired as if they're half drunk. And so, you know, it's very relaxing then, and it is. I've tried it, it's very relaxing. Apply figure 60 cones of moxa on top. Sounds like a lot, but if the patient really has cold, you know, it's going to feel very good. And they'll start to sweat profusely. This is what we want. And they'll start sweating from D20 down to kidney 1. When this happens, wind, cold, summer heat, dampness, the 5 taxations in this will all be completely removed from the bones and marrow, from the deepest level that corresponds to the kidneys. If the patient doesn't sweat, though, they won't recover. So if they don't sweat, you can do it again 3 days later or 5 days later. Keep doing it until the patient has this really profuse sweating. And so up to 120 cones will treat pretty much any disease, is what they claim. I'm not saying this is true, but that's what they're saying. When you apply moxa, be careful of wind and cold, of course, because they're really sweating, so their body is so open up to push the cold out. But because the body has opened up and they're sweating, you have to be so careful of wind and cold. In addition, they have to really nourish life after this. Avoid oily, greasy, raw, cold foods, and take care of your health for at least a month afterwards. And this will, you know, give additional benefits to Jingxin. But in a woman, they say don't use musk. Instead, use Zhengnao, which is camphor, because musk can move blood, and you know, if she's pregnant or trying to get pregnant, or maybe if she's menstruating, then it may move blood too much, I believe is the reason. And then he goes on and says, Yan Cui explained that these 20 herbs float and sink, move up and move down at the same time. Well, I don't know why he claims Yan Cui with this. I don't know. He did take it from an earlier source, which may have been attributed to Bian Cui, this Warring States period doctor, but I really doubt it, unless somebody's channeling Bian Cui. So these herbs have sovereign, minister, assistant, and envoy. They treat diseases of taxation, which is extreme overwork to the point of exhaustion in your damaging Jing. They treat cough. There's nothing they fail to cure. They're not just for taxation. So these are some pretty big claims. I think, you know, maybe if you have a patient with some kind of long-term chronic disease or long COVID, as long as they're not having too much heat in their body, this might be like a nice thing to try. And so he goes on, generally fume the umbilicus once in each of the 4 seasons. So do it 4 times a year, 1 in each season. And then Yuan Qi, original Qi, will be firm and secure, and the 100 diseases will not develop. This treats long-term cough or panting, spitting blood, cold taxation, seminal emission, white turbidity, which is a white discharge generally from the penis, failure of the yang matter to rise, which means impotence, extreme weakness of the lower origin, Jing-Shen abnormalities, phlegm occlusion, so phlegm blocking the lungs and stuff like that, and similar diseases, red and white vaginal discharge, female infertility, and severe cold of the uterus. Whenever one uses this moxa treatment, the 100 diseases are eliminated immediately. It boosts qi and lengthens years of life. I tell you, from the old books, there are not many things that they rave about the way they're raving about this. Yeah, there are other things, but this is really a special treatment in his eyes. So moving on, Zhendou Dacheng, really famous Ming Dynasty acupuncture book. gives a similar recipe, but not identical. And he, instead of saying do it once in each of the 4 seasons, he gives a very specific timing of treatment. I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but he uses the 4, the solstices and the equinoxes, and then the 4 midpoints in between, the cross-quarter days, which are the beginning of spring, summer, autumn, and winter in the Chinese calendar. And he has you do it at a very specific time on each of those days. So this is another indication that it was considered a really special treatment. And also this is a way to make sure that the person gets it 8 times in a year. And so Zhenzhou Dacheng continues, Yang Jizhou, the author, continues, when used on one of those days that is open. There's also a day in the Chinese calendar, and it's called an open day, but I think he means the previous days that were just listed. Then when you do it on these specific days, it helps take into the body the right chi of heaven and earth, the yin and yang of heaven and earth, and carry that right chi into the 5 yin organs. In this way, evils can't invade. The 100 diseases can't enter. Long life can withstand aging. You can grow old without, becoming, like all withered. And the spleen and stomach will be strong. So this treatment unites the right chi of the 4 seasons. It completes the creation of heaven and earth. This method of moxa is never ineffective. You can see how much these doctors, this is the 2nd doctor that's just raving about it. There's more in Zhenzhou Dacheng, but there's this is the last 5 year information. Okay. So just to point out that there are a lot of different recipes for this. Here's one from another Ming Dynasty doctor, Gong Tingxian, which is very different recipe, but he still calls it umbilical steaming method. So he wants you to use 1 zi each of 3 herbs. A zi is a unit of measurement that took me a long time to figure out what it is. But when you have these ancient Chinese coins, then there are 4 characters. A character is a zi. And so a zi is the amount of powder that we take to cover one of those characters. So that's a really tiny amount. Okay. So 1 zi each of the musk, banxia, Pinellia, and zaojia, which is a less commonly used herb. We'll see its Latin name later. So then cut a thin slice of fresh ginger. We don't have to use the huaipi, the sephora bark, but we could use fresh ginger and stick it on the umbilicus. Apply moxa with big cones on the slice and steam it by doing the moxa 2 times 7 cones. They often talk like that. What I suspect, and I have some reason to suspect this, when they say 2 times 7 cones, they mean 2 sessions with 7 cones in each session, but it could just mean 14. Also apply the same amount of moxa to Ren 4 and Ren 6, Guanyuan and Qihai. Hot qi will flow freely on the interior, and cold qi will be forced out of the body. Yin will retreat and yang will recover without further intervention. And in his recipe, he doesn't give any timing, but many of the recipes give timing. So you can see this is a totally different recipe. Okay. So I found about 10 recipes. I think there are 10 recipes. And as I said, I made a PDF of it and also the slideshow, and somehow that should be available to you. But because there are 10 different recipes and no 2 were identical, you can see it's not a magic formula that there's only one way of doing it. So we can devise our own formulas today because of what we're trying to accomplish, you know, the functions of the herbs, or because some herbs are not available and we have to substitute. We do need to adapt formulas because of endangered species, or some are too expensive, or some are hard to get, or there's like 1 or 2 herbs that I don't really know what they are. And also, when a formula has 20 herbs, many people aren't going to do something that difficult. So I'm going to tell you what I did, but first I want to give you a criticism. So we have 2 sides to the debate here. And so Yu Chang was another famous doctor of the Qing dynasty. He's like a Wenbing kind of doctor, among other things. And he said, this method uses very hot herbs. They scatter qi. And he lists a few of them: Sheshang, Yu Huang, which is sulfur. We didn't see that in any of our recipes, but I believe it is in some of the recipes. And Fuzi, aconite. The patient is steamed and burned with mugwort fire. It's fortunate if the doctor doesn't strike true qi, you know, bite in true qi. And if the patient gets away without great harm, it's fortunate. When this steaming stirs up true qi, the true qi is scattered and isn't stored, and it becomes disordered and isn't peaceful. So some people have been quickly executed by this method. You can see he's not a fan, but of course you have to select which patients this might be beneficial for. Okay, so moving on to the method and all your options. Ooh, I'm running out of time. Okay, so of course, you know, here's the umbilicus. And so they said make a ring of dough. It's like, I'm not really gonna do that, probably. In the hardware store, you can get these rubber rings that are called grommets. And then you just get them like maybe a few different sizes in case somebody has a bigger umbilicus or a smaller umbilicus. You could even put some gauze down first so that it's easier to clean up afterwards, because qi can penetrate through gauze. But yeah, okay. Then you can put, you know, they call for sheshang, but we're probably not going to use that. Jiangmiao is camphor and bingpian is borneol, correctly, and these help the qi penetrate into the umbilicus. Some sources say no sheshang for women, and this step could be omitted. You don't have to do this. And then fill the umbilicus in the ring with the finely ground herbal powder, pack it down, poke holes in it, you know, pick your recipe or make up your own recipe. Some of the sources say to moisten the powder, which makes sense if you call it steaming the umbilicus, you'd think you'd need some moisture. Either using ginger juice or baijiu, you could use vodka instead, but you know, not too much, you don't want it to be soaking. Or huangjiu, yellow rice wine, you could moisten it with that. And then cover with a slice of something. Most of them said this sophora bark, but that's hard to find. So we can use fresh ginger, which will add some moisture to it and change the slice when it gets burnt. And then do it until the patient sweats all over is what some say. Others say until there's small sounds in the abdomen. When I've done, my abdomen starts gurgling. I hear gurgling in my abdomen. Some sources say until they have bowel movements that have phlegmy stuff in it. Some say a number like 50 to 60 cones up to 120 cones. Another recipe says 1 cone for each year of age. So if somebody's 60 years old, you use 60 cones. We saw 14 cones. And another one says 10 cones a day, do it every day for 36 days to make 360 cones. So you can see all the recipes differ on that. Instead of doing moxa, if you can't, you could use a microwave heat pack or a hot water bottle on. It may not be the same, but still using this heat to, you know, over the herbs in the umbilicus is called ironing. And you could, you know, do that instead. Another thing that could be done is taping the powder on and retaining the powder. Like you could do the matzah, take off the slice, use a, self-adhesive bandage to tape over it, and then they can remove it the next time they take a shower. One source says you can blend mugwort with herbs, fill a bag and put it on the abdomen and then iron it. Ironing means heat plus pressure. So you put a hot, heavy thing on top, like a hot water bottle or microwave heat pack with a little pressure. So there are lots of options, including some non-smoke options. The timing, we saw different books say different things. And so we saw this in Genja Dacham. If it's daylight savings time where you are, you should adjust the time so that you're, in standard time. And for the exact dates for these things, you can find it on the internet. It can vary, like Lichun, the first day of spring, is sometimes February 3rd, sometimes February 4th, sometimes February 5th. And Southern Hemisphere would use the same dates, but the seasons are flipped. So these things called the 8 mains is like the 4, the solstices and the equinoxes, which are 4, and then the first day of each season in the Chinese calendar. But we don't really have time to talk about calendar. I've got videos about Chinese calendar on my YouTube channel. And then take care of yourself for a month afterwards. We saw avoid wind and cold, avoid foods that could, that are prohibited. One source prohibits alcohol and sex. One source says no tea, and so forth. So my last batch of slides, I think these are my last batch of slides. I found 10 recipes, and so I like to make little, tables and quantify things. And so 7 of the 10 recipes had frankincense. 6 of the 10 recipes had myrrh. So these are things that, are probably going to be in the recipe. Plus they smell good. Cloves and mushang are in a bunch of them, and fennel. So these are like aromatics. It seems like all the recipes, or most of the recipes, had some highly aromatic herbs in it. There were other plant materials, but you can see this really varies depending on the recipe. There are 10 recipes, and fudza was the most common, but that's only 3 of the 10 recipes. Each of these was in 1 of the 10 recipes. As far as the plant material goes. Then there's salt. 6 out of 10 had salt. And one of the characteristics of salt is that it goes to the kidneys. But another characteristic of salt is it holds on to heat for a longer period of time. So salt is good even when the matzah is burnt down, it will still stay warm for a while. So I just use the coarse sea salt that we use in fermenting vegetables. And one said, like, basically mang shao, which I don't know, I didn't try it. And then there's some minerals, but I think we're really not going to use, especially the first 2. Realgar has, some kind of toxicity when it's burnt, although we're not burning it, we're just heating it. And cinnabar, and these are harder to find and so forth. It's up to you, but yeah. And then animal products. Personally, I try not to use any animal products. Then many of these are endangered species, tiger bone and pangolin scales, we're just not going to use. I might consider longu, but I don't know if I don't really get why it's in this recipe. So this shika, I don't know if it's a literal spider's nest or if it's actually, maybe it's a plant that's called spider's nest. I Googled it, but I didn't really get an answer. And then almost every recipe had some kind of animal droppings, animal poop. You know, 6 had Wulinger, and you can see, and a couple of these, I don't really know what animal it is. Even Unschild's translation of Bansao Gangmu doesn't know what some of these are. So, yeah. I'm also not big on using these. You could. Finally, let's see, finally, okay, 5 minutes left. Okay, sorry. Yeah, we're almost done. Finally, of course, you need moxa floss. And then, you know, 10 of them mention sheshang, but with exceptions. And then you could substitute zhengnao, which is camphor, or bingpian borneol. And then you make the ring. So let me show you what I did quickly. Oh, there's still, here's, you know, a couple more. I already mentioned these things. Okay, so I picked these herbs. All of them were in the recipe from Yishui Rumen, and you know, it doesn't matter the amount I made. These are, you know, the proportions that I used of these 5 herbs. Some of them I had pre-powdered, because Rushang and Moyao are difficult to powder in a grinder. They tend to want to melt. And I also had Fuzi powdered. When I talk about powder, I don't mean granules. These are ground up herbs. Okay, and so I ground them up and sifted them and made a fine powder, and it smells really nice. And then I have some zhengnao camphor, which I bought from like an incense place, not from a Chinese medicine place. And I've got some Guangzhou, some yellow rice wine, and a dropper to drop a little in after I put the powder in the umbilicus. So I drop it in after. I wouldn't mix it first and then pack it in. And then I mentioned, I'm not going to make that dough ring. Here is, this is called a grommet, which is not a word that I ever used in English, but it's some kind of rubber ring that's used, I don't know, in plumbing or something like that. And it's really cheap, and you can go find them in different sizes. And so I got a size that was just slightly bigger than my umbilicus, and I fresh ginger, and moxa cones, incense to light it, ashtray, lighter, tweezers to put a little piece of zhengnao in my umbilicus, and the dropper with the Huangzhou, the yellow rice wine. And so there's a video, but we don't have time for the video. But you know, if you have the handouts of the slideshow or of the raw translations, there's a link there. So there's a video of me talking about it and doing it, so you can watch that yourself. And so I want to thank everyone who helped me, and also there are people who probably helped me that I didn't get their name. And the Dutch TCM conference has like wonderful speakers, and I'm really honored to have been asked. And I also want to thank you for, you know, listening to this and watching this. So that's my talk. I hope my time is approximately correct. Yeah, it is. So, questions?
Yes, Lorraine, it was perfect timing. That in the first place. Thank you for your great presentation. You probably know what I'm gonna do the coming weeks and what I will play with. There might be a paramedic, something like that in me. But I really accept that it's lovely to play with moxa. I like the fact that you stress out the flexibility. We don't have everything available nowadays. How do you work with that, but also using modern tools to make it practical? So that really inspires me. And I guess I'm sure also other people. There are some questions from the audience that I would like to ask you on behalf of the audience. The first one is, could we substitute the moxa cones with loose moxa in a moxa box? Do you have experience with that, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, you could. I have a bunch of Moxa devices that are, you know, small. They're mostly from Korean sources, and so I wouldn't use a whole big Moxa box over it necessarily, but you could put that, you know, in the umbilicus and then put one of those, you know, small round ones on top. That would be perfect.
Okay. Another question is regarding the minerals that you were, or salt, actually, what you're talking. Would using gray salt with trace minerals make a difference for better results, or have you any suggestion on other type of salts?
Yeah, I wouldn't use grocery store salt, at least not grocery store salt in the U.S. You know, I mean, there's Tibetan pink salt, and there's like sea salt, and there's like all kinds of salt. I just use something that hasn't been overly purified.
Okay, thank you. Another question. At the beginning, you mentioned melting. It's the word melting. It seems
Smelting with an S.
Smelting. It sounds like, it seems like a reference to internal cultivation, Neda.
Yeah.
Do you know whether the burning moxa was an important part of Tao's cultivation, or something related to that, because they're using the term smelting?
Yeah, I don't know. I really haven't studied Taoist cultivation enough to be able to speak to it. The only thing I know, I've seen photos from Japan where they do have this like moxa hat and do moxa and Bai Hui do 20 as part of their cultivation. But I think cultivation in Chinese is not only Taoist cultivation, which of course it is that too, but just cultivating health. I really don't know. He doesn't say anything about that. None of them say anything about that. The first one is the only one that used the term smelting. All the others used fuming or steaming, and we can see he also used those terms. So, sorry, I don't have an answer.
Okay. Another question from the audience was, to start with playing it, you showed, of course, some pictures, you have a video, but anything that you say you really need to pay attention to, except reading the manual first, to fools like me, of course.
Well, always practice on yourself before you try it on someone else, you know, because, you know, first do no harm, and if I'm going to do harm, at least I'd rather do it to myself than another human being. So always, your skills get better when you practice, and it's better to practice on yourself so that you're not fumbling when you're working on a patient. But, you know, if a patient really needs it, you might need to do a lot more sessions or a more intense session. If you don't need it, you might only want to do 1 or 2 cones just to make sure you know how it feels and what to do. But yeah, I don't have anything special to say. Don't burn the patient, don't burn yourself. Although ancient people like moxasaurs, but this is not a method for moxasaurs. You don't want to burn the umbilicus.
Okay, thank you for a great presentation. I'm sure that we all really get excited and will start following your YouTube. At least I'm doing it. I guess it's just if you go to the channel, you also accept that we will share the slides later on. But if you go to your channel, we can find that video as well.
Actually, that one is private, so
Okay.
you need the link.
Okay.
Most of my stuff is public, but since like that one doesn't have the whole context of, but it's private. I might do one later that like covers the whole thing.
Awesome. Then we all know we'll make sure the audience can get the YouTube link so they can watch it at home and be inspired and start playing on themselves first before trying it out on the patients. I would like to thank you for your time and being with us. It was an honor.
Thank you.
To the rest of the audience, this was our final speaker. I thank you for being with us for a whole day. I would like to thank all the speakers for spending time preparing, but also being here on really inconvenient hours for some. and to share their experience with us to make this Congress a success. Final a few things. We will get in a minute our president of the DCCMC, or Dopey will be here. We will find a few words, and after that we will have a poll to get some feedback of you and know how we can make next year Congress even better. So please stay until the end, until the poll, and I thank you for being with us. Spotlights.
Yeah, you got it.
Oh.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to ask you to switch on your cameras, please, for this final part. So it'll be more cozy, more comfortable with each other. Thank you. All good things come to an end, and so does the 6th Annual Dutch TCM Congress. I hope you as participants and speakers found it just as satisfying and gratifying as the people organizing it. I can assure you this Congress, which is unique in the world with its triple lingual forum setup, wouldn't exist without the love and dedication of the entire global TCM community. It was remarkable that even though this year's Congress was still virtual, many people told us that they could sense a tangible energy between the organization, the speakers, the participants, solidifying the energetic connection between all that were involved. So on behalf of the DTCMC, I would like to thank the following organizations and people for their involvement and promoting of our conference. Starting with our sponsors, the main sponsor OTCG in Belgium, and sponsor Sanbao Chinese Medical Education Center, and first-time sponsor Total Health. We also had many representatives of various associations join our Congress this year, like Sophie Mollekens and Adriana Wald of BAF in Belgium, Mieke Vlaming of EUVOM in Belgium, Chantal Compier and Marianne van der Meer of MBOG in the Netherlands, Giulia Boschi and Elisa Moscarella of Otto in Italy, Pedro Serra de Matos and Ana Maria Varela of APA MTC in Portugal, Rachel Chang of SZKMA in Slovenia, and Julia Stier of RGTCM in Germany. And also quickly a thanks to our congratulatory organizations this year, TCM, Qigong Therapy, Acupuncture Academic, Faculdade Abraham Mackie, the Chinese Acupuncture and Herbal Medicine Alliance, Western Sydney University, the ETCMA, the TCM Academy, Oxrider Academy, and the Dutch Acupuncture Academy. Preparing and executing the actual Congress takes a lot of work, and we couldn't have done this without the tireless effort of this year's volunteers, which I would also like to name Dr. Hugo An, Josh Barrow, Karel Blontrok, Dr. Lin Chen, Ka Fong Chong, Eileen Henk, Ayelet Harpaz, Grace Hu, Jean Liang, Teresa Pinto, Dr. Tian Rongreng, and Carla Verhaaf. Also, thanks to everybody that shared our content on social media, hashtag DTCMC 2023. Not too late to add that to your post. And also thanks to Dr. Laying Wilcox-Cat, that special guest walking by the camera. And of course, I must not forget the back office of the Dutch Association for Traditional Chinese Medicine, NVTCG Song, consisting of Natasha Peyer, Marianne Schlüger, and Lisala van Beek. And last but certainly not least, all of our wonderful national and international speakers. I know it's a long list and it's far from complete, but we like to show our gratitude towards you, the audience, involved in organizing the DTCMC. So I hope we can keep this energy going, and hope to see you all next year for our 7th annual DTCMC, which will be 100% live in a yet to be disclosed location in the Netherlands. But it'll be live. So thank you all and have a good night.